The studio lights blazed hot, casting sharp lines across the polished desk where the cameras were already rolling. Every eye in the room was fixed on the woman in red, Sarah Palin. As she leaned forward with the kind of smirk that was less about humor and more about belittlement, her words, sharp as glass, cut across the air without hesitation. She did not go after Jasmine Crockett's policies, her record, or even her ideas. Instead, she struck where dignity is supposed to be untouchable appearance. With a mocking tone dripping with arrogance, Palin twisted her lips into a sneer and tossed an insult meant to humiliate, not debate. For a moment, the entire studio froze. The air turned heavy, the silence louder than any applause could ever be. Gasps flickered through the audience, some even shifting uncomfortably in their seats, unsure if they had just heard what they thought. They heard. The moderators glanced at each other, their faces pale with disbelief, while the camera panned to capture every trembling breath, every shifting glance. Palin's smirk grew wider, as though she believed the cruelty was a triumph, a moment that would tilt the room in her favor. But across from her, Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. She did not bow her head or avert her gaze. Instead, her eyes narrowed ever so slightly, the faintest signal that something far more powerful than anger was building behind her composure. She sat tall, her silence more commanding than Palin's sneer could ever be. It was the kind of stillness that warned everyone watching. A storm was coming. The question hung in the air, unspoken but alive. What would Crockett do next? The answer, as the world would soon see, was about to leave the studio in shock. What happened in that room was never just about a single insult. It was about something deeper, something that reached into the core of who we are as a country. When a powerful figure feels free to mark the way another American looks, it exposes more than arrogance. It reveals the cracks in our democracy, the fragile line between leadership and cruelty, between dignity and disgrace. That moment became a mirror, reflecting the way too many people with power have tried to weaponize identity against those who dare to stand tall in their truth. For millions watching, this was not entertainment. It was a reminder of the battles fought in their own lives, in workplaces, in classrooms, even within their own families. The smirk of the antagonist carried echoes of every time someone dismissed an accent, every time someone mocked a name, every time someone told a young immigrant child that they did not belong. The stakes were no longer about a clash of personalities. They were about belonging, pride, and the fight for respect in a nation built on diversity. And yet, even as the insult lingered in the air, there was a sense that something bigger was about to unfold, because this was not the first time a voice like this had tried to belittle others. It was part of a pattern, a history of attempts to define Americanness in narrow, cruel terms. But here, in this room, there was someone prepared to push back with a force and grace that could not be ignored. Audiences leaned in, sensing the gravity of what was coming. Social feeds buzzed. Commentators hinted at the tension, and whispers turned into roars of anticipation. The atmosphere shifted from shock to expectation, because everyone knew the next move would not just silence the insult, it could reshape the conversation about who gets to define dignity in America. And what came next left the entire country holding its breath. To understand the weight of that insult, you have to know the story of the one who delivered it. The antagonist did not arrive in that room by accident. They built their career on spectacle, on carving out a space where cruelty could masquerade as strength and arrogance could be mistaken for confidence. From the very beginning, their path was marked not by service, but by ambition, an ambition that grew sharper each time controversy gave them more attention. Their early years in politics were riddled with contradictions. They spoke of faith, yet wielded contempt like a weapon. They preached about family values while treating others' families as disposable footnotes. They claimed to be champions of freedom, yet used every ounce of their power to narrow who that freedom was meant for. Each public appearance became less about policy and more about performance. Less about truth and more about domination. Crowds that wanted easy answers cheered, and in that cheering, the antagonist found license to push boundaries even further. But beneath the applause, cracks had always been visible. There were scandals whispered about in hushed tones, deals made in shadows, and moments when even allies questioned the excessive arrogance. They brushed it off with the same smirk they would later wear in that hearing. The smirk of someone who believed they were untouchable. Their rise was not built on unity but on division, not on dignity but on derision. And yet, for a time, it worked. The louder the insult, the larger the stage they claimed. This pattern became a cycle: provoke, deny, and emerge emboldened. To their followers, it looked like resilience. To anyone watching closely, it looked like desperation disguised as swagger. The antagonist thrived on chaos because chaos kept questions at bay. But chaos, as history has always shown, cannot last forever. Every insult, every contradiction, every hollow victory planted seeds of downfall. People began to see through the act, to notice the gap between what was promised and what was delivered. The hypocrisy became harder to hide, the arrogance harder to defend, and when that smirk appeared once again in the hearing, it carried not just disdain, but the weight of years of deception. Because the truth is, villains write their own undoing, long before the moment arrives. They cannot help it. Arrogance blinds them to the fact that every insult creates an opening, every contradiction sharpens the blade that will one day cut them down. And in that room, across from someone who embodied the very dignity they tried to strip away, the antagonist's long-cultivated persona was about to collide with reality. The stage was set. The villain believed this would be another performance, another easy moment to dominate. But what came next would not follow the old script. It would not end with their smirk. It would end with silence so powerful it would echo louder than their arrogance ever had. Long before the cameras ever turned toward her, the hero's life had been shaped by battles that most people never saw. She was the daughter of a working-class family who believed in dignity even when the world refused to offer it. Her parents taught her that survival was not enough, that one must live with pride, no matter the hardships. She carried that lesson through childhood, walking into classrooms where her name was mispronounced, her accent mocked, her very presence questioned. Each insult etched itself into memory, not as defeat, but as fuel for a fire that only grew stronger. When she spoke of her roots, she did not speak with shame. She spoke with the steady conviction of someone who had seen sacrifice firsthand. She remembered her parents working long hours, their hands blistered, their backs bent, yet their spirits unbroken. That strength became her inheritance. Every time she was told to sit down, she found a way to stand taller. Every time she was told she did not belong, she made belonging impossible to deny. Her journey into public life was not driven by ambition for spotlight, but by a calling she could not ignore. She had walked the streets where people were silenced, stood in communities where injustice was not a headline, but a daily reality. She had listened to voices that the powerful dismissed, and in those voices, she found her mission. Service was never about prestige, it was about protection, about ensuring that the next generation would not endure the same scars she carried. But none of this came easily. She faced rejection, ridicule, and relentless attempts to push her back into silence. There were moments of doubt, nights when the weight of carrying both her people's pride and her own dreams seemed unbearable. Yet, she kept going, armed with the unshakable belief that dignity was not negotiable. With every setback, she grew sharper, steadier, more unyielding. By the time she walked into that room, she was no stranger to arrogance. She had faced it before in teachers who doubted her, in colleagues who tried to overshadow her, in politicians who believed her voice could be drowned out. But each encounter had prepared her for this moment. Every insult from the past was a rehearsal for the showdown that now stood before her. She carried herself with a calm that was not weakness, but discipline. Her silence was not surrender, but strategy. And beneath that composure lay years of resilience, years of building a shield that arrogance could not penetrate. The antagonist saw someone to mark. What they did not see was someone forged in fire, someone who had already overcome more than their insults could ever match. And as the smirk widened across the villain's face, she did not flinch. Because she knew something they did not. This time, the tables were about to turn. This time, the silence would not belong to her. It would belong to them. The room was electric, every eye fixed on the unfolding confrontation. What had started as a tense exchange quickly spiraled into a storm of words. Each sentence sharpened with intent. The antagonist leaned forward, voice dripping with contempt, each insult crafted to wound, to provoke a reaction, to shake the composure of the hero. Their words were fast, precise, designed to dominate the room, but beneath the aggression, a tremor of unease had begun to appear. For the first time, arrogance was meeting resistance it could not easily dismiss. The hero remained calm, measured, in every response, letting each jab hang in the air just long enough for the audience to feel the weight of injustice. She did not raise her voice, did not mirror the venom. Her composure was magnetic, drawing eyes away from the villain's theatrics toward the quiet strength in her demeanor. Every interruption from the antagonist was met with patience, every smirk countered by a gaze that refused to be intimidated. The tension built, thick and suffocating, a silent drumbeat echoing in every corner of the room. Whispers began to spread through the spectators. People leaned forward, sensing the shift. The villain's tone sharpened, frustration creeping into the cadence, exposing cracks in what had seemed invincible. Their arguments, once confident and commanding, began to falter under the weight of logic, dignity, and the silent power of a hero who refused to flinch. Every rhetorical flourish became a strain, every smirk a desperate attempt to reclaim control. The audience could see it, the cameras captured it, even the walls seemed to vibrate with the impending turning point. And then it happened. A question, calm and piercing, hung in the air, carefully delivered, impossible to dodge. The antagonist hesitated, a pause so telling it felt like a lifetime. The hero's presence was not just resistance, it was a statement. Every word, every breath carried the strength of years of struggle, the weight of lived experience, and the unshakable certainty that dignity could not be derailed by arrogance. For a moment, silence claimed the room. The villain's confidence wavered, and the hero's calm became a weapon more powerful than any insult. But just as it seemed the moment might settle, the hero's next words promised to change everything. A revelation was coming, one that no one in the room could ignore. The world was about to witness a turning point, and no one, least of all the antagonist, was prepared for the shock that would follow. The hero paused, letting the room settle into a fragile silence. Every eye was fixed, every ear straining, as if the air itself had thickened, waiting for what would come next. The antagonist, still smirking, leaned forward, ready to pounce on any sign of weakness. But what they did not anticipate was the precision of the hero's timing, the quiet, before the storm, the moment when restraint transforms into undeniable power. She began not with anger, but with clarity. Every word was deliberate, each sentence a scalpel slicing through the arrogance that had filled the room. She recounted moments the villain had tried to hide, contradictions, broken promises, and the hollow rhetoric that had masked cruelty for years. The audience could feel the tension mounting, the weight of truth pressing against lies long told. With every revelation, the antagonist's confident posture began to falter, their smirk shrinking, their voice catching ever so slightly. The hero's tone shifted seamlessly, from calm exposition to sharp precision, revealing not just facts, but the moral weight behind them. She painted the stakes in human terms, the countless lives affected by the villain's actions. The community silenced, the children taught to fear who they were, and then she delivered it the line that would echo beyond the walls, the words that would make history feel immediate, a statement so piercing, so undeniable, that laughter, applause, and gasps erupted simultaneously from the spectators. Cameras flashed, pens scribbled, social media feeds ignited before the words had even left the room. The antagonist tried to interrupt, tried to deflect, tried to regain control with a raised voice and forced gestures. But the room would not bend. Every attempt at domination fell flat against the hero's composed presence. Their arguments, once commanding, now sounded hollow and reactive. Every hesitation, every faltering word became proof of the unraveling. For Wade, the audience sensed it. The villain was losing, not in some abstract sense, but in real time, before their eyes. And then the hero leaned in, not in aggression but in confidence, delivering the final blow with the precision of someone who had lived a lifetime preparing for this moment. The words landed like a hammer, undeniable and resonant, leaving no room for rebuttal. Silence followed, heavy and electric, as if the world itself paused to acknowledge the moment. Even allies of the antagonist exchanged uneasy glances, even supporters felt a shiver of doubt. For a heartbeat, the villain froze, the arrogance drained from their posture, replaced by panic, disbelief, and the faintest trace of shame. The hero did not gloat. There was no need. The triumph was not in triumphing over a person but in asserting truth, dignity, and justice where they had been threatened. The impact rippled instantly. The kind of moment that would dominate headlines, trend on social platforms, and be dissected for days, weeks, and months. As the hero straightened, calm and unwavering, the room collectively exhaled. The antagonist's world had shifted in an instant, their dominance shattered by measured words, unshakable pause, and moral clarity, and just as murmurs of astonishment began to fill the chamber, the hero's gaze hinted at the next revelation, a truth even more powerful waiting to unfold. The audience, breathless and entranced, could not look away. They knew the real shock was still to come. The moment the hero's words landed, the world outside the room seemed to shatter and reassemble in real time. Phones lit up with notifications, feeds flooded with clips of the exchange, and hashtags began trending before anyone could catch their breath. Every social media platform buzzed with the same refrain: astonishment, admiration, and a growing chorus of validation for the hero who had dared to stand unwavering in the face of arrogance. Memes circulated, capturing the hero's composure, the villain's faltering expressions, and the undeniable moral clarity that had dominated the room. Commentators dissected every phrase, every pause, every calculated glance. Analysts who had once treated the antagonist as untouchable, were forced to acknowledge a seismic shift. Opinion pieces splashed across news outlets, framing the confrontation not merely as a clash of personalities, but as a defining moment for accountability and dignity in public life. Talk shows replayed the hero's words on loop, each repetition amplifying their impact, turning the exchange into both spectacle and lesson. Even celebrities weighed in, sharing their admiration and using their platforms to highlight the broader significance. Their voices added fuel to the fire, transforming a singular confrontation into a movement of conversation, reflection, and demand for higher standards. Politicians, too, could not remain silent. Allies of the hero praised the courage and precision of the response, while the antagonist's supporters struggled to recalibrate, their defenses weakening under the weight of public scrutiny. Across the nation, the ripple effect was undeniable. Communities once resigned to silence now found inspiration. Parents recounted the moment to children, using it as a lesson in resilience and dignity. Young professionals and students shared it with peers, framing it as proof that courage and preparation could triumph over intimidation. The dialogue spread beyond politics, sparking broader conversations about identity, respect, and the power of speaking truth to authority. And yet, even as the applause and validation surged, there was an undercurrent of suspense. The hero had not finished. The victory in that room, however decisive, was only the opening act of a larger reckoning. The nation, the audience, and even the antagonist knew this was a turning point, but what would come next could shift everything once again. The world held its breath, waiting for the next chapter of this unfolding story. As the echoes of confrontation faded, the hero stood not in triumph over an individual, but in testament to the enduring values that define a nation. The room, still charged with the residual tension of the battle, became a stage for a larger truth. Dignity cannot be stolen, identity cannot be mocked, and courage is measured not by aggression, but by the steadfast refusal to yield. Every word spoken, every pause held, now served as a mirror reflecting the ideals that bind communities together. Beyond politics, beyond labels, she spoke of justice, not as a distant concept, but as a living principle that demands action and integrity. She reminded the audience that the measure of a society is not in the power it grants the privileged, but in the respect it affords the marginalized. Her message resonated not only with those in the room, but across the nation, through screens, social media feeds, and conversations sparked in homes and workplaces. It was a lesson in Americanness not defined by exclusion or contempt, but by inclusion, fairness, and the courage to stand firmly for what is right. The emotional crescendo rose with every sentence. She framed the attack, once meant to humiliate, as a catalyst for reflection and unity. The arrogance she faced became a lens to examine larger patterns of injustice, and the silence that followed her words held the weight of moral clarity. Audiences, witnessing the transformation of hostility into purpose, could not help but feel inspired. They were reminded of their own strength, of their capacity to respond to adversity with poise, and of the power inherent in maintaining dignity against the tides of contempt. Her final words were both a call and a benediction, that every person, regardless of origin, voice, or background, carries within them the ability to rise above provocation, to turn insults into lessons, and to champion justice in ways that echo far beyond the moment. The message was simple yet profound. Courage and integrity are contagious, and one act of steadfast dignity can ripple through communities, shaping a future grounded in respect and shared humanity. And as the room exhaled collectively, the audience felt it, the unmistakable spark of hope, the stirring recognition that what had transpired was more than a confrontation. It was a demonstration that truth, courage, and morality can, and always will, prevail. As the dust settled and the headlines began to form, one truth remained unmistakable: courage, integrity, and dignity had prevailed. What began as a shocking confrontation had transformed into a defining moment, proving that standing firm in one's values can silence arrogance and inspire millions. The hero's calm strength had turned an attack meant to divide into a lesson that unites, showing that identity, pride, and respect are never negotiable. This was more than a single victory. It was a call to every viewer watching from home. The story was a reminder that each person carries the power to confront injustice, to uphold dignity, and to make a difference, no matter the odds. It was a testament to the idea that one voice, guided by truth and courage, can ripple outward, touching countless lives and inspiring action. If you felt that spark, that surge of hope and pride, you are part of this moment too. Join the movement of people who refuse to be silenced, who choose integrity over intimidation, and who stand for a better, more just future. Subscribe, share this story, and let your voice be heard. Together, we turn moments of confrontation into catalysts for change, proving that courage is contagious and dignity always triumphs.